Hello all, Sharon Slater here. The following is part of a series of tips and tricks I have picked up while researching online genealogical and historical resources over the last 2 decades. Today we're going to be looking at the Census of Ireland for 1901 and 1911. It's part of the National Archives of Ireland collection and the URL is here. I'll be putting the URL into the description box below. So what we're going to do is dive straight in to the search the records for Ireland 1901 to 1911. The default setting here is 1911. You do the drop down for the 1901. There are also fragments of the 1851, 1841, 1831 and 1821 census. We'll have a small look at them, but those are only fragments. There's very few of those available. So we'll do a first search. In the surname bar we'll go with Smith, and for our forename we'll put in John. We'll leave it as all counties just so we can see how many names this comes out with, and that's 1126. So for any search that's quite a lot. We need to narrow that down. So in all counties we'll narrow it down with Limerick. We'll search that, and here we have 5 records. So we'll go with John Smith from Old Francis Street, who is 7, and we'll click on his transcription. In this transcription of his household, his father Richard was the head of the household. So we can do the show all information, and it will show all the transcribed information relating to that household. These are transcriptions, so it's important to note that there is human error involved. So we will look at the original record, which is down here, the household return form A. And as you can see straight away, even on this record there is a transcription error, and it's showing up that the original family name was Smith with a Y, not with an I. So if we go back and if we try and look for Smith with a Y, John, any county, we're going for Limerick, and we know that he is 7, so we put in 7 for the age that he is. So we'll search, and we have 5 results again, but with John Smith with a Y, but not John Smith from Old Francis Street. So if your family have a name that has multiple varieties, or if you're researching a name with multiple varieties, here's the first tip. You can change the letter. It is often changed to a star, and that will show variety of letters in that space. So now we have the Smiths with a Y and the Smiths with an I, and here he is again, our John Smith showing up. As with today, sometimes people didn't always put their names into correct boxes and forms, so sometimes you have to look the opposite way around. For John Smith, and we'll put in a star again for the variety, and we'll change this out to all counties just to show how this works. So John Smith, search. So there were 6 people who were recorded who had their names down in the opposite order for John Smith. So it's an important thing to note, to sometimes change these names around. Okay, so sometimes people were in institutions as well at the time of the census, so in a hospital or in one of the other many institutions, or work in the police force. So when they were in those, they only use their initials, so we put in S in the surnames and J as the forenames. We'll see how many people that comes out to. So there was 1,152 people who were recorded with just the initials JS. So we're going to narrow that down to see if we can find the person that we might be looking for. So we look it down to Limerick, and then we have 36. At this point, we see now there's only 36. We can go into the 50 records per page here, and then we will show all information. Now, as we're looking down through these records, we can see ranges of individuals and their occupations. Okay. So if we take this guy, for example, on Mulger Street, he's 25, so we click in there to him. So it's part of a household there. So again, we'll go down to the original hospital return form. So this JS was in a hospital, and we will go down. Now we have a JS there, but our guy was a carpenter and this one was an agricultural labourer, so he's out. We will go down a little bit further. So we have JS, read and write, and he's a carpenter, single, Limerick, and there's an added piece of information here in the hospital records saying that he was from Croom, whereas on the transcription records it just had him down as Limerick. So this would be very helpful for somebody searching for a JS who might be a John Smith, who was a carpenter, who was 25 if they had this other information, who was originally from Croom. We're going to move on to some other tips now to try and find individuals without their names. Okay, so let's go back to our original John Smith, who was 7 years old, living in Limerick. So here he is, and we'll go on to his family. And again, as I mentioned earlier, here's the transcribed information, and they show more information. Okay, and down to the household information form, and let's see if there's any other information we can gather from that that wasn't in the transcribed information. Now we have the entire family here, and what we can see is that Christina on the transcribed form wasn't given any age, but here she's 6 months old. Okay, each of the members of the family was recorded as living in Limerick. As Richard could read and write, down below here we have an example of Richard's writing. It's interesting that the form was recorded with the name as a Y, recorded by the enumerator who was getting the information from the head of the household. But when Richard signed the form, he signed it with an I. So even families where they were literate, the names could often be written down incorrectly by the people who were filling out the forms. Now, we'll go back to the other original information that's attached to each of the census forms. So we have the additional page to the household return form, which would be the back side of the form, which has the information on where the house is located. Okay. It also gives you details of the different jobs and what they meant, so it's much easier if you're not fully aware of what kinds of jobs there were in 1911. This will give you much more detail on that. Now, these following forms are very important, and the enumerator forms, it gives you a wider view of the area at the time, So we can see here that this household was resident in 14.1. If somebody was resident in a house with a point number, that meant that it was a house that was split, so usually an apartment. So if we go into the enumerator forms here, we can go down and see this one goes down to just 11, so we'll just go back to the page 2. So we've got number 14. Now there's one house, and in that house there are 4 families, and here are there's 8 men, 10 women inside in those 4 families, and it's split out for how many of those are Roman Catholic, and same with the rest of the form will be filled out the same. So again, this second form will tell you details about the building that the person you're looking for was living in. So we'll check again here. This one is up to 7. So we'll go to page 3 straight away to find house number 14. So here it starts at the bottom, so house number 14 here, and it tells us what kind of a house it is. So it's a built house, it's a private dwelling, because this is ditto of the information up above. These rows here tell us about the state of the walls, what they were made of, the state of the roof, what it was made of, how many rooms were in the home, how many windows were at the front. So we see these are low numbers in the classifications for this house, so which makes it a second class house. In this row here, it tells us again how many families were living in that building, and Richard is here, and his family has 1 room. So the family of 6 are living within 1 room. Okay, so if we go back and we go to page 4, and we'll see everybody else here. These extra 4 are the other families that were also living in house number 14, and each of these also had 1 room per family, with 6, 5 and 1 people living in those rooms in the house at the time. These office and farmsteads come into play in the countryside more often than the city, but we'll just have a look at it here. See, there's only information for house number 7 here, and it has a store at the back of it. Okay. Now, if we know what street the person we're looking for was living on, but their name doesn't seem to be coming up, one of the things we can do is search for the street here, or another option, and I find this useful if you find a family such as the Smiths here, is to check the full street itself. So here you go back 1 street to Old Francis Street, and this will give you the household name, the head of the household name for everybody who's living in that street. Sometimes it's good to check here because family members often lived close by to each other. So here we have the Kellys both living in separate apartments in house number 8. So we have Timothy, 38, as the head of household in one of those houses, and John, 40, as the head of the household in the other house. It's most likely that those two were brothers, so it's good for trying to find family members in close proximity. Okay. If you take one more step back again, this takes you to the electoral district. So these will be all the streets within the same area. So this comes in handy just to even find out yourself what streets were in the area. So if you're looking on other records, you can see who lived near to each other. Okay. So what if you can't find your family but you have some information about them? This is when you use the more search options. So you might have believed that your family remained in just in Limerick. They were born in Limerick, in the state of Limerick, but it's quite possible that they were born in Limerick but moved to another county. So you need to put in your county of origin as Limerick. Okay. Now you also know that they were a carpenter, so you fill in the carpenter form. You know that this family member was single. So let's see if there was any single carpenters who originally came from Limerick on our form. So we've got 467 who were originally from Limerick, who were now living in both in Limerick and in other places. So you can see there's quite a few people in Dublin and Kerry. So from here again you can narrow down the search using this information. So you might know from other information that this person is about 30. You know that they can read and write, and you know that they are Roman Catholic. So we will search that and see what we get. So we have 165, which narrows it down a good bit. A good few of these are still in Limerick. But what we can do is we can do the show records per page to 100 again, and we'll select it by county. So this way you can go through the counties and check if those are your individuals, using both the transcription and also going back to the original census forms as well. And then you can go straight past all the Limerick ones onto the next page, show all information. We've got a Tipperary one right at the end here as well, that was originally from County Limerick. Okay. So we see John Finn. Here he was working as a servant. Now we'll go back to the search census, and we'll just have a quick look at the 1901, and we'll go for our Smiths again and our John. Again, we have 2,346 this time in 1901 with our John Smiths. So we'll go for County Limerick again, and we'll search. We've got 18. Okay. Now we'll just go into one of these. I want to find somebody who is married. So John Smith, the first one, is married. So unlike the 1911 census, this census, the household return form, so this form is missing the columns for number of years marriage and number of children born and number of children still living. All the other information is the same as what it was in the other form. So we will have a quick look at the previous census that we have fragments for, and these are just fragments, so we'll do a more search options and see the people who originated in Limerick. Search, so we have 20 people on the fragments who originated in Limerick. So let's go with Catherine Totham here, and it has the full household, and for some reason on this record it seems to be repeated. So we look at the original record. Again, very important, always check out the original records. These ones here, we just give it a rotate and we'll zoom in and have a check. So Catherine Totham, she was 32 at the time, wife, she was married. She had been married twice, first in, it looks like 1836 and again in 1845, which would be very useful information to have. And she was from the city of Limerick. Okay, so we'll search again. We'll just go back and have a quick look at the other census and see the information that's available for those. So again, we'll just put in Limerick as an example, or we can put in a county. So there was only 9 people in the 1841. And one of these was from Limerick. So Patrick Hartnett in Galquin. We'll just have a check of his family. Here we have the front page, just again showing the basic information of where the house was located. And we have the second page here. So we have Patrick and his wife Jules. What's interesting to note on this census, it has X's in place of other family members who were not in the household that night. So although it doesn't have a column to say how many children were still alive, just by counting the X's you'll be able to figure that out. Okay. So we'll just have a quick check in Turnafulla, see if there's any other households or if it's just the one. Yes, and here we see it was just the one fragment that was remaining and just the Hartnetts left from the 1841 census. And you can just continue to do the same for the 1831 and 1821. So we'll just have a look to see about finding people who used Irish. This is quite a difficult one. You generally have to know what street they were living on, because oftentimes the transcribers weren't able to transcribe their names or transcribe them incorrectly. So let's go with Limerick and Bedford Row. So this can be sometimes a slow slog. So we'll search here and we see that we've got Tomas here. And again we'll look at, because there's very little information coming up for most of these forms and most of these columns. So we look at the household form to see how they filled it in. And we can see here he filled it in quite a bit of detail, but it was in Irish. So the head of the household, and all the information following on from that. So we'll do one more tip before we finish off today. So we'll go again for our Smith and John in County Limerick. and we've got our John here. So we have him in the 1911 census. So we want to try and see if he was living in the same house well, he wouldn't have been because he was 7, but if his parents were living in the same house in 1901. So what we have here is that the census was 1911, the county was Limerick, the electoral district was number 6 urban, the street was Francis Street. So we go straight back and we click on census years, and then we click 1901, down to Limerick, then we find the urban district, number 6. See, there's a change in what it was called, but it's the same urban district. And then we want Old St. Francis Street. Now, while we have a number of individuals living here, we can't see a Smith. But that's just showing you how to work back to the street. You can work forward or backwards using that tip. And that's where we're going to leave it for today. I'll leave the URL for the census in the description below. And if there's any other tips and tricks that you've learnt while using the census, please leave them in the comments section below, and we might come back to this. I'm also going to leave a link to my PayPal in the description box, so if you'd like to buy me a cup of herbal tea, I'd be delighted. I need one after this. And I will see you next time with some more tips on how to make the most of free online genealogical and historical sources. Goodbye for now.